We've got time to take one more question. Now, we had a lot of questions on this issue, and it's from Corinne Lowe, please.
Yeah, Britain has promised nearly £1 billion of aid over 3 years to India. Can we afford this in the current climate of cutbacks?
There have been a lot of questions about whether we should go on funding aid to India. Nigel Farage.
Well, we're giving £50 million a day to the European Union, and on top of that, we now have and that budget is due to go up by 60% in the next 2 years. And at the same time...
Do you answer every question in terms of Europe? Even a question that's asked about India?
It's interesting, David. But this, of course, is the great truth of our life that everyone's tried to deny for years, is just how important this issue is.
Yeah, but
and the fact that most of our laws come from here.
Yeah, but it wasn't the question.
Well,
can you answer Corinne's question?
Well, I've answered... I'm the only panellist that's answered each of the questions directly before. I will come to your question. It is completely mad that here we are with aircraft carriers, with no aeroplanes, where this week we've announced that 100 pilots, who we'd spent an average of £3 million each on, who'd almost completed their training, suddenly being told it's all ended, and yet we're going to give £300 million a year to a country that has aircraft carriers, with up-to-date jets, with trained pilots, with nuclear weapons, and with a government that admits it doesn't need the aid. We are pouring too much money away.
Victoria Barnsley.
Well, as a percentage of GDP, you can probably tell me, Vince, how much do we actually spend on overseas aid? I mean, it is
it's rising to something like less than 1%.
Exactly, it's very small. I agree. I think there's an issue. We have to review all the time where that is best spent. I mean, there are, at the moment, for instance, after the incredible floods that there have been everywhere, there are probably other places we should also be spending. But, it's a very small amount of money. It needs to be constantly reviewed, but I would hate to see it cut back.
But India is the question, Vince Cable. Should it go to India, which, as Nigel Farage says,
yes, I would defend
a hugely growing economy, 8% a year?
The easiest thing for the government to have done with its aid budget would be, in the face of all the cuts, to have said, charity begins at home, let's stop giving money to foreigners. We'd probably got a big round of applause from a lot of people. But we stuck to our guns and argued that actually the aid programme that we have, which is quite modest but valuable and is targeted on some of the poorest people in the world, is something we want to keep.
But when you say the poorest people, India is...
Yes, India is also a
subcontinent. But they don't want the money, then?
No.
The government doesn't want the money.
Well, because the money that we do channel through our aid programme does not go to the central government of India. It goes into specific projects in some of the poorest parts of the world. India is a vast country, I know it very well. And there are parts of India that are highly developed. And there are other parts that are the poorest parts of the world, poorer than parts of Africa. And the money is channeled very often into non-government organisations helping those people, and it's helping with real development.
But if India's growing at over 8% a year, when we're growing at 0%, don't they have the resources to do that?
No, they don't. No, they don't.
They've got aircraft carriers and planes, things we haven't got. Cancelling
aircraft carriers in India would not deal with the poverty of about 500 million people who live at the absolute bottom level of subsistence.
OK. The woman in red there, yes.
They're also spending millions on a space programme.
Yes.
So
you think it's wrong that this should be spent this way?
They need to be looked at, because they've also got 3 times as many, dollar billionaires in India than what we've got.
OK.
Well, they're investing a lot of the money here.
And the woman up there, the second row from the back.
This is to Vince Cable. What about the poor people here? What about the disenfranchised here? What about spending some money here?
Well, we are, and we should.
No, you're not.
We are, and we should.
No, you're not spending money here. You're giving billions away in foreign aid. You're not spending money here. You want to wake up and smell the coffee. There's lots of poor people here.
Well, absolutely, and absolutely right. One of the first things this government did when we came in was to protect the basic state pension. It had been abandoned for many years, and we've now linked it to earnings. That is the most vulnerable section of the community, the elderly. Their pensions are now protected. That was our top priority. The fact that we look after them does not mean to say we should walk away from hundreds of millions of people overseas who are far poorer than anyone in this country
As
is
Nigel
ever likely
Farage
to.
pointed out, they've got a space programme. How much are they spending on that?
Well, not large sums in relation to
They must be
poverty
spending millions on a
requirements of the
space
country.
programme, and you're still giving them money. You're disingenuous and pretentious.
No,
I'm sorry.
not at all.
Yvette Cooper.
I was just about to come to Vince's defence on this, because I think that I think it is a problem that people who are on low income in this country are being hit by the VAT increase. So I think that is a serious problem. But I do also think that
£1 billion redirected would answer the lady's problems.
Well, I think the government is right to keep what are limited commitments, in fact, on overseas aid.
Why?
Because I think the overseas aid, it is still less than a percentage of GDP, even with if all of the targets are met. I think we do have a moral responsibility to care about deep poverty and the kinds of extreme poverty that cannot just it's not just the difficulties that it causes for families and the sort of suffering that it happens across the world, but it's also the impact that it can have on conflict, on areas where you
But
have
in India, the
poverty.
question was
There are
about
also problems
India,
about
and £1
conflict
billion
as well.
pounds over 3 years, redirected as the lady at the back there wanted, would surely do more to help youth unemployment in this country, for instance.
Well, I think we should continue to support youth unemployment in this country. I think we should be doing more to support youth unemployment in the country. But I don't think we should. I don't think we should
They
be.
need the money if they've got a space programme.
What I don't think we should do is to cut money from the very poorest people in the world in order to do
You're not
so.
answering my
I do think there is an
question, as
issue
usual,
about
as
making sure that
politician.
you're spending it in the right countries and in the right way. And it's right that the government should make sure it's not giving money to foreign governments who have resources, but is supporting the very poorest people in the world.
Well, I'm not sure that Vince has made as big a claim as he could have done, because as I understand it, this government, for the first time, has accepted a target of percentage of GDP in overseas aid, which the United Nations and goodness knows who have claimed as an aspiration. Actually, this government has committed itself to it, which I think is the first time, and amongst very few other countries. Now, of course you can say, let's have it all at home, if that's the sort of country you want to be. But we have always taken a view that there is an aid crisis across many parts of the world, as Yvette has said. I know India quite well. The standards of living of large numbers, hundreds of millions of Indians, is indescribably awful. And I hope that Britain, a rich country, is not just going to say, well, let us have a big society at home where charity plays a significant role and we look after the less privileged. We will actually remain a world power, and we will remember that once this was part of the British Empire, and we have obligations and responsibilities today.
OK. As always, there are a lot of hands up. I'm afraid there's nothing I can do about it, because I'm sorry to all of you. Apologies, our hour is over. It's always a pity. We could have 1.5 hours, I think. We're going to be in Wales next week at Newport. You can all come down there if you want to. And we're going to be in Derby the week after that. Now, if you want to be in the programme in the audience, 0330 123 99 88 is the number to ring.